In the dead of night, while a family slept believing they were safe behind closed doors, a weapon of fire was hurled into their home. What followed was chaos, fear, and a desperate fight for survival. That is how this story begins. Not with a warning, not with a confrontation, but with flames ripping through the quiet of the night, shattering the illusion that home is always a place of safety. Before we go any further, take a moment to subscribe to Real Crime Saga, like this video, and turn on notifications. These stories are not just headlines. They are real lives, real families, and real consequences. Staying informed matters. This attack happened in Dublin, a city known for its history, its tight-knit neighborhoods, and its sense of community. On this particular night, those values offered no protection. A petrol bomb was thrown into a family home, turning an ordinary residence into a scene of terror in seconds. Inside the house were parents and children, asleep, vulnerable, and completely unprepared for what was about to happen. A petrol bomb is not a warning. It is not a threat meant to scare. It is a weapon designed to destroy. When it hits, it explodes into flames instantly, filling rooms with fire, smoke, and heat so intense that escape becomes a race against time. For this family, there was no chance to prepare, no moment to understand what was happening. 1 second they were asleep. The next, their home was on fire. What makes this attack particularly disturbing is its randomness. This was not a crime scene hidden in the shadows of criminal activity. This was a family home, a place where children did homework, where meals were shared, where doors were locked at night under the belief that those locks meant safety. There were no visible signs that danger was coming. No argument outside. No warning knock. Just sudden violence. As flames spread through parts of the house, panic took over. Confusion replaced clarity. Parents scrambled to find their children. Children woke up screaming, coughing, disoriented by smoke and heat. In moments like this, time behaves differently. Seconds stretch into eternity. Every decision matters. Every movement could mean the difference between life and death. Neighbors, later describing the incident, spoke of screams cutting through the silence, of seeing fire where there should have been darkness, of shock that something so brutal could happen on their street, to people they recognized, to a family just like theirs. This attack left multiple family members injured. Some suffered burns, others inhaled smoke. All of them suffered trauma that would not fade when the flames were extinguished. Because when violence enters a home like this, it doesn't leave quietly. It lingers in memory, in fear, in the constant question of why us. That question hangs heavily over this case. Why this house? Why this family? Was it a case of mistaken identity? A deliberate act of intimidation? Or something even more reckless and senseless? At this stage, there were no clear answers. Only the aftermath of fire, fear, and shattered peace. As we move deeper into this story, we will look at who this family was before that night, what exactly happened when the petrol bomb was thrown, and how a single violent act changed their lives forever. Before the fire, before the screams, before the headlines, this was simply a family home. The family living in the house were an ordinary working family, the kind you would find on almost any street in Dublin. Parents who worked hard to keep their household running. Children who went to school, worried about homework, argued over small things, and felt safe enough to fall asleep without fear. There was nothing remarkable about them in the public sense, and that is exactly what makes this story so unsettling. They were not known to the police. They were not living on the edge of conflict. They were not involved in criminal activity. They were just living their lives. The house itself sat in a quiet residential area, the kind of neighborhood where people recognize familiar faces, where routines blend into one another. Early mornings filled with school runs and work commutes. Evenings spent indoors, doors locked, lights on, families settling in for the night. It was not a place where violence was expected. It was not a street people avoided. It was home. Inside those walls, life followed a predictable rhythm. Parents made plans for the future, worried about bills, and did their best to provide stability for their children. The children, unaware of how fragile safety can be, trusted that their home was the one place where nothing truly bad could happen. That belief is something many of us share. We lock our doors, close our curtains, and assume that whatever dangers exist in the world will stay outside. This house was meant to be a place of rest, a place where arguments ended, where exhaustion found relief, where sleep came easily. Bedrooms held personal belongings, toys, clothes, reminders of everyday life. Kitchens carried the signs of routine meals. Living spaces reflected normal family living, not secrecy or danger. There was no reason for anyone to believe this house would become a target. That is why the attack feels so deeply wrong. Petrol bomb attacks are often associated with intimidation, gang disputes, or criminal feuds. They are usually linked to messages meant to be sent, warnings meant to be understood. But this home did not fit that narrative. It was not a base of operations. It was not a symbol of conflict. It was simply where a family lived. When violence enters a space like that, it shatters more than glass and walls. It destroys trust. It rewrites the meaning of safety. For this family, everything they believed about their home changed in a single moment. The place that once offered protection became a source of trauma. Rooms that once felt familiar became reminders of fear. Neighbors later described their disbelief. Many said the same thing. It could have been any of us. That realization is what made the attack ripple through the community. If this family could be targeted, then no one felt completely secure anymore. The randomness of the act turned fear into something shared. What makes this even more disturbing is the innocence of those inside the house. Children do not choose where they live. They do not choose the dangers that come to their door. They trust the adults around them to keep them safe. That trust was violently broken on this night. Understanding who this family was and what this home represented is crucial, because this was not an attack on a building. It was an attack on ordinary life itself. And in the next part of the story, we will step into the exact moments when that ordinary life was ripped apart by fire. The attack happened in the late hours of the night, drifting into the early morning, a time when the world feels suspended between days. Most of Dublin was asleep. Streets were quiet. Lights were off. Inside the house, the family had settled into rest, unaware that their lives were about to be violently upended. It was during this fragile window of sleep that the petrol bomb was thrown. There was no knock on the door, no shouted warning, no chance to react. Someone approached the house under the cover of darkness and hurled the device through an opening, either a window or a door, aiming directly into the living space. The act itself took seconds. The consequences would last a lifetime. A petrol bomb is a crude but devastating weapon. It is usually made from a glass bottle filled with flammable liquid, often petrol, with a cloth or fuse stuffed into the opening. When lit and thrown, the bottle shatters on impact, spreading fuel instantly and igniting flames that expand with terrifying speed. Unlike a single flame, a petrol bomb creates a wall of fire. It clings to surfaces. It spreads along floors, furniture, curtains, anything it touches. It is unpredictable, uncontrollable, and deadly. The moment it landed inside the home, the night exploded into chaos. Glass shattered. Fire erupted. Flames leapt across the room, climbing walls, licking at ceilings. Thick, black smoke poured into the air almost instantly, turning familiar rooms into disorienting, choking spaces. The smell of burning fuel filled the house, sharp and overwhelming, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. Parents woke to the sound of destruction and the heat of fire. Children woke screaming, confused, terrified, struggling to understand why their home was suddenly filled with flames. Darkness and smoke erased any sense of direction. Panic took over as instincts replaced thought. In moments like this, there is no calm decision-making. Parents shouted names, searching blindly for their children. Children cried out, coughing, frightened by the fire and the unfamiliar terror closing in around them. The house that once felt safe became a maze of danger. Fire spreads faster than most people realize. In seconds, it can turn a single room into an inferno. Smoke moves even faster, filling hallways and stairwells, stealing oxygen and visibility. Every second mattered. Every breath mattered. A delay of even a few moments could mean the difference between escape and tragedy. Some family members stumbled through smoke, their eyes burning, their lungs struggling. Others were forced to retreat and find alternative exits as flames blocked familiar paths. The confusion was total. The fear was absolute. Outside, the quiet of the night was shattered by screams and the glow of fire reflecting against nearby houses. Neighbors, drawn by the noise and the light, realized something was terribly wrong. But inside the house, the family was still fighting to get out. Eventually, they did. Injured, shaken, and traumatized, they escaped a burning home that had nearly become their grave. But even as they made outside, the damage was already done. Burns, smoke inhalation, shock, and psychological trauma had taken hold. The fire did not just destroy part of a building that night. It destroyed the sense of security that comes with sleep. It taught a family, in the cruelest way possible, that danger does not always announce itself. And as emergency services rushed toward the scene, one truth became painfully clear. This was not an accident. It was a deliberate act. Someone had chosen fire as a weapon, knowing full well that people were inside. In the next part of this story, we will look at what happened after the flames were contained, and how the immediate aftermath revealed the full scale of what this family had endured. The screams were the first thing neighbors noticed. In the stillness of the night, cries for help cut through the silence, sharp and panicked. People nearby looked out of their windows and saw something no one ever expects to see on their street. Flames pouring from a family home. Smoke billowing into the dark sky. The orange glow of fire where there should have been darkness and calm. Some neighbors froze in disbelief. Others reacted instantly. Emergency services were called as panic spread through the street. Voices shook as callers tried to explain what they were seeing, struggling to process the fact that a house, a family home, was burning from the inside out. Within minutes, sirens echoed through the area, growing louder as fire engines and ambulances raced toward the scene. Firefighters arrived first, moving quickly and with urgency. They were met by thick smoke, intense heat, and a house already showing clear signs of severe fire damage. Flames had blackened parts of the structure, windows were shattered, and the smell of burning fuel hung heavily in the air. Their priority was clear: make sure no one was trapped inside, and bring the fire under control before it spread further. Paramedics followed closely behind, focusing on the family members who had escaped the burning home. The scene outside was chaotic. Parents shaken, trying to hold themselves together while checking on their children. Children crying, coughing, clinging to the nearest adult. Some family members had visible burns. Others struggled to breathe, their lungs affected by smoke inhalation. All of them were in shock. Shock does strange things to the body. Some people trembled uncontrollably. Others appeared strangely calm, their minds overwhelmed and unable to fully register what had just happened. Paramedics worked quickly, assessing injuries, administering oxygen, and deciding who needed immediate hospital care. Several members of the family were taken to hospital for further treatment. Burns needed to be assessed. Smoke inhalation can worsen over time, even if symptoms seem mild at first. Others were treated at the scene, wrapped in blankets, monitored closely, and comforted as best as possible. No one was left untouched by the trauma of the night. As firefighters extinguished the remaining flames, the full extent of the damage became visible. Parts of the house were blackened and charred. Walls were scorched. Furniture destroyed. Windows blown out. The interior was left soaked, smoke damaged, and unsafe to enter. The home that once offered warmth and protection now stood as a reminder of violence and vulnerability. Yet amid the devastation, there was one undeniable fact that stood out. Everyone survived. That fact mattered. It mattered deeply. But survival did not mean escape without consequence. Injuries would take time to heal. Trauma would linger far longer. Sleep would no longer come easily. The sound of breaking glass or the smell of smoke could trigger fear for years to come. For the family, the aftermath was not just about physical recovery. It was about standing outside their ruined home, realizing they could never return to it in the same way. It was about understanding that someone had deliberately chosen to endanger their lives. As the streets slowly filled with emergency lights and concerned neighbors, one question echoed through everyone's mind. Why would anyone do this? In the next part of the story, attention turns to the investigation, as authorities begin searching for answers and trying to understand who carried out such a reckless and dangerous attack. As the flames were finally brought under control and the injured family members were receiving medical care, the focus shifted quickly from rescue to investigation. Garda made it clear from the very beginning that this was not being treated as an accident. This was a deliberate and targeted arson attack, and the seriousness of that distinction could not be overstated. Officers from Garda moved swiftly to secure the area. The street was cordoned off, access restricted, and residents asked to remain inside their homes. Blue and red lights reflected off nearby houses as uniformed officers established a perimeter around the damaged property. What had been a quiet residential street hours earlier was now an active crime scene. Forensic teams were called in to examine the remains of the house. Every detail mattered. Burn patterns were studied carefully to determine where the petrol bomb had landed and how the fire had spread. Shards of broken glass were collected, some potentially from the bottle used in the attack. The smell of fuel lingering in the air only reinforced what investigators already suspected. This fire had been ignited deliberately, with intent. Inside the house, the damage told a violent story. Blackened walls, scorched floors, and fire-damaged furniture marked the path of the flames. Investigators worked methodically, documenting everything. Photographs were taken. Samples were gathered. Nothing was rushed, because in cases like this, a single overlooked detail can mean the difference between justice and unanswered questions. At the same time, detectives began asking the most difficult question of all: why? Was this a case of mistaken identity? Had the wrong house been targeted in a reckless act meant for someone else? This possibility haunted both investigators and neighbors alike. The idea that a family could almost lose their lives simply because someone got an address wrong was deeply unsettling. Was it connected to a feud? Garda examined whether anyone linked to the household had ongoing disputes, debts, or conflicts that could have escalated into violence. Early indications suggested this was unlikely, but nothing was ruled out. Was it an act of intimidation? Petrol bombs are sometimes used as messages, a way to instill fear rather than cause death. But investigators knew that once fire is involved, control is an illusion. Intimidation can turn lethal in seconds. Or was it pure recklessness? A senseless act carried out without regard for who might be inside, or whether anyone would survive at all. Petrol bomb attacks are treated with extreme seriousness because of their lethal potential. They are not minor crimes. They are acts that can kill entire families, spread to neighboring homes, and cause irreversible harm. The fact that children were inside this house elevated the urgency and gravity of the investigation even further. As news of the attack spread, fear settled over the community. The possibility that the person responsible was still at large weighed heavily on residents. Parents looked at their own homes differently. People double-checked locks, windows, and security lights. The sense of safety that once defined the area had been shaken. Garda reassured the public that every available resource was being used to identify and apprehend the person responsible. But reassurance could only go so far. Until someone was held accountable, uncertainty lingered. Because when a petrol bomb is thrown into a family home, it doesn't just burn walls. It burns trust, peace, and the belief that violence will stay somewhere else. In the next part of this story, we will look at how the community responded to this attack, and how the impact of one night of terror extended far beyond the walls of a single house. As dawn broke over the neighborhood, the full emotional weight of what had happened began to settle in. What the fire had not destroyed, fear and anger now threatened to consume. The local community woke up to the reality that a family home, just like theirs, had been deliberately targeted with fire. The shock was immediate and overwhelming. Neighbors stood outside their homes, looking at the blackened remains of the house, struggling to reconcile what they were seeing with what they believed about their area. This was not a place known for violence. It was a residential street where people waved at each other, where children played, where nights were usually quiet. The idea that someone could walk into this space and throw a petrol bomb into a home felt unreal. Anger followed quickly after shock. People asked the same questions over and over. Who would do this? How could anyone justify endangering children? What kind of message requires fire as its delivery? For many, the most disturbing part was not just the act itself, but the complete disregard for human life. Whoever carried out the attack knew people were inside. They knew families sleep at night. They knew fire does not discriminate. Fear spread through conversations and whispered exchanges. Neighbors openly admitted what many were thinking. If it happened to them, it could happen to anyone. Parents looked at their own front doors differently. People checked windows, gates, and security lights. Night felt less safe. Sleep felt less certain. The sense of vulnerability was shared. People questioned how such violence could reach a family home without warning. This was not a business premises, not an isolated location. It was a house on a street filled with other houses. The randomness of the attack made it harder to rationalize and easier to fear. Yet amid the fear, something else emerged. Solidarity. Neighbors checked on the affected family as soon as they were allowed back near the house. Offers of help came quickly. Temporary accommodation, clothing, food, childcare. People who barely knew each other before the attack found themselves united by a shared sense of outrage and compassion. The community made it clear that the family would not face this alone. There was also a strong demand for justice. Residents wanted reassurance that whoever carried out the attack would be found and held accountable. Conversations turned to the broader issue of rising violence and intimidation tactics. Petrol bombs, once associated with specific conflicts, now felt dangerously close to ordinary life. People questioned whether intimidation had become normalized, whether reckless acts were escalating because perpetrators believed they would not face consequences. There was concern that if this attack went unanswered, it could embolden others. Fear thrives in silence, and the community refused to stay silent. Local voices spoke about the need to protect families, to address the roots of such violence, and to ensure that residential areas remain exactly that, places where people can live without fear. The attack was not just seen as an isolated incident. It was viewed as a warning sign, a signal that something was deeply wrong. For the family at the center of it all, the community response offered some comfort. While their home had been damaged and their sense of safety shattered, they were reminded that they were surrounded by people who cared. But even with solidarity and support, one truth remained. A line had been crossed. Violence had entered a space where it should never belong. And as the community continued to grapple with fear, anger, and unanswered questions, attention turned back to the family themselves, whose lives would never return to what they were before that night. Surviving the fire was only the beginning. For the family, the real aftermath started once the flames were gone and the noise of sirens faded. What remained was a deep emotional and psychological wound that could not be treated with bandages or medication. In the days following the attack, the reality of what they had lived through began to sink in. Sleep became difficult, especially for the children. Nighttime, once associated with rest and comfort, now triggered fear. Darkness reminded them of smoke-filled rooms and burning heat. Some woke up screaming from nightmares. Others refused to sleep alone, clinging to their parents, afraid that if they closed their eyes, the fire would return. Even small sounds in the house caused panic. A door creaking, a sudden noise outside, the sense of safety that every child should feel in their own home had been ripped away. For the parents, the emotional burden was crushing. Alongside fear and anger came guilt. Guilt for not being able to protect their children from something so violent and unpredictable. Guilt for believing their home was safe. They replayed the night over and over in their minds, wondering if they could have reacted faster, done something differently, prevented more harm. These thoughts offered no comfort, only exhaustion. Anger also simmered beneath the surface. Anger at the person who threw the petrol bomb. Anger at the randomness of the attack. Anger at a system that allowed someone to commit such a reckless act and then disappear into the night. That anger was complicated, tangled with fear and grief, making it difficult to process. Physically, recovery was slow. Burns take time to heal. Smoke inhalation can leave lasting effects, including breathing difficulties and fatigue. Medical appointments became part of daily life. But even as bodies healed, minds struggled to catch up. Trauma does not follow a schedule. It surfaces unexpectedly, in moments of quiet, in places that once felt familiar. The home itself became another source of pain. Even after repairs, even after walls were cleaned and damaged areas restored, it no longer felt the same. The memory of fire lingered in every room. Certain spaces were avoided entirely. The smell of smoke, even faint or imagined, could trigger panic. The house was no longer just a building. It was a reminder of how close they came to losing everything. For this family, survival did not mean the end of suffering. It meant learning how to live with what happened. It meant rebuilding trust in a world that had proven itself unpredictable and cruel. It meant helping children feel safe again, even when the adults themselves were still struggling. What makes this impact even harder is knowing that none of this was their fault. They did nothing to invite violence into their lives. Yet they are the ones carrying the consequences. That is the true cost of crimes like this. They do not end when the fire is put out. They continue in the minds and hearts of the victims long after. As the family faces a long road to recovery, one thing is clear. The damage goes far beyond physical injuries or property loss. It reaches into the deepest sense of what home means. And once that sense is broken, rebuilding it takes time, patience, and support. In the final part of the story, we step back to reflect on what this attack says about society, violence, and the urgent need to prevent such acts before they destroy more lives. When we step back from the details of this case, from the flames and the injuries and the shattered home, a larger and more troubling picture begins to emerge. Petrol bomb attacks are not isolated incidents. They are part of a wider pattern of violence that has taken root in many urban areas, including parts of Dublin. And each time one is thrown, it raises uncomfortable questions about how society has reached this point. Petrol bombs are often used as tools of intimidation. They are meant to send a message, a warning, a display of power. The intention may be to scare, to threaten, to force someone into submission. But fire does not understand intention. Once a petrol bomb is thrown, control is lost. Flames spread where they choose. Smoke fills every space it can reach. Innocent people become collateral damage and a message they were never meant to receive. This is what makes these attacks so dangerous and so morally indefensible. Whoever throws a petrol bomb may claim they did not intend to kill, but intention becomes meaningless when the weapon itself is capable of wiping out entire families in minutes. Children asleep in their beds do not get a choice. Parents trying to protect them do not get a warning. Fire does not discriminate between targets and bystanders. The deeper question this case forces us to ask is unsettling. How did society reach a point where fire is used as a message? Where throwing a petrol bomb into a home is seen by some as an acceptable way to communicate anger, fear, or dominance. This is not just a policing issue. It is a social one. It reflects a breakdown in conflict resolution, accountability, and respect for human life. Violence like this rarely stays contained. Even when the intended target survives, the damage spreads outward. Neighbors lose their sense of safety. Communities become anxious. Children who witness or hear about such attacks grow up believing that danger can arrive at any moment. Fear becomes normalized. Silence becomes a survival tactic. And perhaps most disturbingly, the people most affected are often those who had nothing to do with the original conflict, if there even was one. Families like the one in this case do not choose to be part of violence. Yet they are forced to live with its consequences. They carry the trauma, the fear, and the lifelong scars, while the person responsible may disappear into anonymity. This reflection is not just about one attack. It is about the direction society is moving when intimidation escalates into acts that risk mass harm. It is about how easily lives can be destroyed when violence is treated as a shortcut instead of a last resort. And it is about recognizing that every petrol bomb thrown is a gamble with human life, one that too often ends in tragedy. As we reach the end of the story, the final question remains. What can be done to stop this cycle before another family is forced to learn, in the most brutal way possible, that survival does not mean safety? One petrol bomb, one moment, one family changed forever. Those words are simple, but the reality behind them is anything but. In a matter of seconds, a family's sense of safety was ripped away. Their home turned into a place of fear, and their lives redirected onto a path they never chose. This was not a story of criminals clashing behind closed doors. This was not a calculated confrontation between people who understood the risks. This was a family asleep in their home, trusting that the walls around them would protect them. That trust was shattered by fire. When we look at this case as a whole, what stands out most is not just the violence itself, but how easily it reached innocent people. A petrol bomb does not knock. It does not ask questions. It does not care who is inside. It arrives without warning, and in doing so, it strips away the idea that danger can always be seen coming. That is what makes this crime so deeply unsettling. The family survived, and that matters. But survival does not erase trauma. It does not undo fear. It does not restore sleep, or confidence, or the belief that home is always safe. Those things take time to rebuild, and sometimes they never fully return. The scars left behind by this attack are not only physical. They live in memory, in instinct, in the way doors are locked a little tighter and nights feel a little longer. So we are left with a question that goes beyond this one case. What kind of society allows families to be targeted in their sleep? It is a difficult question and an uncomfortable one. It forces us to look at how violence has evolved, how intimidation has become normalized, and how quickly reckless actions can endanger lives that were never meant to be part of any conflict. It challenges us to consider whether enough is being done to prevent these acts, to intervene before anger turns into fire, and to protect those who have done nothing wrong. This story is not meant to leave you feeling helpless. It is meant to make you think, to remind you that behind every headline is a human story, a family, children, parents, a home, real consequences that extend far beyond the moment of impact. If this story made you reflect, share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe enough is being done to stop crimes like this? What do you think needs to change to protect families and communities from acts of intimidation and violence? Your voice matters, and conversations like these are where awareness begins. This is why Real Crime Saga exists, not to sensationalize violence, but to tell the human stories behind the headlines, to give space to the voices often lost in the noise, and to remind us all that crime is never just about an act. It is about the lives it touches, the damage it leaves behind, and the responsibility we share to confront it. Thank you for watching. Stay aware. Stay human.